19 minutes after 8. Yes, it is the end of 2006, the beginning of 2007 coming up. And Kimberly Law is an image consultant in with us this morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for coming in. And we're talking about New Year's parties. Lots of parties going on this weekend. Of course, New Year's on a Sunday, so there will be parties, I'm sure, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday this weekend. So we just have a few tips for our viewers about, well, let's start with if you're going to host a party. What are some of the tips you would give to people if you were going to be the New Year's party host?
Well, the first thing is you'd want to invite your guests as soon as possible. For a less formal gathering, it's usually about 2 to 3 weeks in advance. But
so we're a little late with that.
A little late. And for a more formal gathering, you may even want to invite your guests up to about 8 weeks in advance of the party. Another thing that you could do is when you're inviting people is you could invite people verbally or with a written invitation. The most important thing is to be consistent with how you invite your guests. So you wouldn't want to call somebody at the last minute and invite them verbally when you've already sent out written invitations to everyone else.
What about email invitations? Is it okay to email invitations?
For a less formal gathering, it is fine to send out email invitations, but if it's a very formal gathering, a nice formal written mailed invitation always is a very nice thing to do.
Okay, all right. So we've got the invitations out now. How do we know who to invite to these gatherings?
Well, you would want to decide ahead of time who you're going to be inviting, but one of the most important things is to indicate in the invitation who is actually invited. Spouses, partners, and children aren't always on the guest list, so it's really important to let your guests know ahead of time if who is exactly invited.
I always tried to make sure that people know if dogs are invited as well. We end up with more dogs than people at some of our gatherings, so also a good thing to know. Now, what about what kind of an event it is? If it's a dinner, or what people should bring, if they should bring presents, or how do you get that across?
Well, again, that should be indicated in the invitation. If it's a bring your own bottle or potluck type party, those are usually best reserved for less formal gatherings with close family and friends.
Okay, otherwise you should be supplying everything. Now, what about hostess gifts? I was at a party a couple of weeks ago with Squire Barnes, who's one of our sports guys here, and he showed up with a hostess gift that was a bag of Twinkies and Ding Dongs, because that's made by Hostess. I thought it was quite funny.
Well, Twinkies and Ding Dongs is a nice hostess gift. I would also suggest perhaps a poinsettia or a bottle of wine, or even a small wrapped gift or box of chocolates, something along that line goes very nicely as a hostess gift. If, though, it hasn't been indicated in the invitation to bring something to drink, people sometimes get confused regarding the bottle of wine. And a bottle of wine, if it hasn't been indicated in the invitation to bring something, should be considered a hostess gift, and it shouldn't be expected that it's going to be opened during the evening.
So you don't just bring it and say, thanks for having me, and I'll have a glass of that.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. And what about as the host of a party? I know a lot of parties end up always in the kitchen, and the host always ends up in the kitchen. So how do you get away from that?
Well, try to have as many of the food preparations done ahead of time. Since the main reason for having a party is to enjoy the company of your guests, you don't want to spend your entire evening in the kitchen. So I think that's the best way to handle that, is just get out of the kitchen. Your guests will follow.
Okay. What about being the perfect guest then? If you're heading to a New Year's party, what should you do if you're going to be the perfect guest?
Well, you would want to RSVP as soon as possible, and definitely within the specific time frame. You don't want to just call the host the day of the party and say, hi, I'm coming, or even just show up thinking that they're expecting you. RSVPing
seems to be a lost art.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, obviously, arrive on time. Smoking and that sort of thing, especially in this day and age, most people don't smoke in their homes anymore. Leaving last, I noticed that was on your list. Don't leave last.
Right. If it's a open house, you would want to leave within the designated time frame of the party, but sometimes there isn't a time frame. And if it's a formal sit-down dinner type party, and nothing else has been indicated in the invitation, I would suggest you would want to stay about 2 hours after the meal is completely finished, and sort of feel your way through at that point and determine when the appropriate time is to leave. But don't be the last person to leave.
All right, and obviously be on your best behavior for these sorts of parties. Well, thanks very much for coming in and setting us up with some good tips for New Year's parties.
Well, thank you.
Awesome, and have a great New Year's.
Thank you. You too.
Christy, it's going to be, well, not a bad-looking weekend if you're going to be out and about partying.